On October 15th, the 138th China Import and Export Fair, also known as the Canton Fair, officially opened. Promoted by officials as the largest and most attended fair ever, it is often seen as a key indicator of China's foreign trade. However, the actual scene at this year's fair tells a different story. On the first day, a user on Douyin posted a video suggesting things didn't look promising. The footage showed the exhibition halls largely empty, with only a few buyers walking around. Exhibitors appeared disengaged, scrolling through their phones, while the few foreign visitors were seen barely glancing at the booths before moving on. The user expressed frustration. "It's not that we aren't trying, but in a situation like this, effort doesn't make a difference. There's no one outside, and inside, it's just familiar faces." One exhibitor jokingly remarked, "The whole event feels more like a networking session for suppliers. There are only familiar faces here." Though the entrance was crowded, there were almost no foreigners in sight. The European and American buyers the exhibitors were hoping for were largely absent, replaced instead by buyers from Belt and Road countries, referred to as China's poor relatives. A user commented, "This morning, I heard on the radio that the fair was a huge success, with hundreds of exhibits boasting fully independent intellectual property. Or are my eyes deceiving me?" Another commented, "The evening news even claimed that foot traffic had increased compared to last year, and that the scene was bustling with people. I'm sure the official report will claim that this year's sales hit a new high." One response said, "They should clarify. Sales are up in Southeast Asia for some small countries, but that's it." This is all just a game. It's like the electric vehicle orders, 800 million orders, but the global market for EVs isn't that big. They're just using years' worth of orders to hype things up. At the end of the first day, an exhibitor posted a video saying,
"The first day of the Canton Fair has ended, and let me share some real insights. There's been talk online about how this year's fair is the largest, with the most buyers and exhibitors. But in reality, from my own experience, I visited the home appliance halls 3.1 and 3.2 today. There were buyers, but not as many as I had expected. The number of exporters seems lower than in the spring fair. Still, it's the first day, so overall the foot traffic felt pretty heavy. There were more buyers, but when you look at where they're from, you'll see more from Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Russia. Very few from Europe and the US. That's one clear trend. Another thing I noticed during the conversations with some of the exhibitors is that the current shape of foreign trade has a lot to do with price competition. Everyone is focused on price. Comparing rates, foreign buyers in particular, are very shrewd. Nowadays, besides wanting good prices, they're also asking for longer payment terms. There's a strong demand for credit terms. Some companies, even if they say they don't offer credit, end up doing so in practice, especially for returning customers. Overall, there is a lot of anxiety about future trade prospects, and it looks like the pressure to lower prices and offer credit will continue.
One exhibitor lamented, "Offering credit terms is like stabbing each other in the back. This isn't trade, it's a race to the bottom. If this keeps up, we'll just end up destroying ourselves." A comment read, "What you're saying is more real than what the news is reporting. This is the truth." Another comment expressed, "We need European and American buyers because they are our most important customers. These Belt and Road buyers just push prices down. They ask for long payment terms and only place small orders. They're like leftovers, unpalatable but hard to get rid of." Was the first day slow because people weren't ready? How did day 2 go? A post showed a video at 11:10 a.m. on day 2, a time when crowds are typically expected, but the scene remained empty. Some exhibitors commented that this year's fair had the strictest control measures ever. The organizers introduced 3 new rules that blocked many companies from attending. The first rule, exhibitor badge applications. In the past, exhibitors only needed to provide proof of employment between the exhibitor and their company. This year, company leaders must submit a social security certificate for at least the past 3 months from the exhibiting company. Regular exhibitors will need to submit a social security certificate for the past month. Scalper tickets? Don't even think about it this year. The announcement was made late on September 20th, and it's clear that no opportunities will be given for businesses to rectify this. The second point is the new red and yellow card system to track violations of booth resales. In previous years, many small and medium-sized enterprises, unable to meet booth application requirements, would resort to buying or sharing booths. Now, they're starting to crack down on that. If a company is listed under different names for 4 consecutive years, they'll be given a yellow card and placed under stricter scrutiny. If they're listed under different names for 6 years, they'll be permanently banned from exhibiting. The third point is that ordinary visitors trying to enter by posing as translators or foreign visitors will no longer be allowed. New regulations specify that translators must have a certification and a degree in a foreign language, and they need to be approved online 2 days in advance. This new policy has caused quite a stir in the foreign trade community. Although the aim is to combat booth trading, the blanket approach hurts small and medium-sized enterprises the most. Faced with this situation, many businesses decided not to participate in the fair. As one user on the Douyin platform posted, "It's unfortunate, but we're gradually moving away from this fair, which has become a bit of a joke, especially for those companies that have participated multiple times without new products and with low-tech products, stuff that even suburban farmers could assemble. In the end, they can only engage in price wars with other exhibitors, and the competition is getting fiercer." Exhibitors who attended regretted it. One exhibitor said in a video, "For those who didn't come to the fair, look, this is what the first day looked like." These on-site videos and comments highlight the Canton Fair's awkward shift from a Europe and US-led global procurement center to a poor relatives gathering dominated by Belt and Road buyers. The gap isn't new. At the fall 2024 fair, European and American buyers fell to 10.5%, down from 20.3% at the previous session. The spring 2025 fair logged a record 288,000 overseas buyers, but few were from Europe or the United States, with growth driven mostly by Belt and Road markets. This year's edition went further. One comment said, "Western countries were collectively absent, and the next year's export orders don't look promising." Reports suggest that only 5 to 10% of pre-registered buyers were from Europe and the United States, with actual attendance possibly lower. Official messaging highlighted nearly 70% growth in Belt and Road buyers, which now make up 64% of attendees. Exhibitors add that these buyers mostly place small, price-sensitive orders with long payment terms, which cannot replace major European and US buyers. Why aren't Western buyers attending the fair? The answer points directly to the US-China trade war and the growing decoupling between the US and China. After months of intense trade talks, the trade war reached a boiling point in October. From reciprocal port fee measures to rare earth export controls to escalating tariffs and even the threat of complete decoupling, U.S. and American companies are steering clear of the front lines. Their procurement has already shifted to friend-shoring countries like those in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, and India. Let's review the key events in the U.S.-China trade war that have led to this decisive phase. On October 8th, the U.S. Trade Representative formally released details of new port fees, which will impose additional charges on Chinese-owned, Chinese-manufactured, or Chinese-operated vessels. Starting on October 14th, these fees will initially be set at $50 per net ton, with a gradual increase to $140 per net ton by 2028. This new charge is expected to add $3 billion annually to the cost for Chinese ship owners. Many shipping companies describe this burden as bankruptcy level. According to Citigroup analysis, while some companies are seeking ways to ease the impact, such as using transshipment ports, giant shipping firms like Costco will still face billions of dollars in additional costs. On October 9th, China rolled out its own countermeasures, imposing a special port fee of 400 RMB per net ton on U.S.-manufactured, U.S.-owned, or U.S.-operated vessels. The fee will gradually rise to 1,120 RMB per net ton. These reciprocal measures effectively create a physical separation between China and the United States in the shipping sector. That same day, China's Ministry of Commerce introduced a rare earth export ban, tightening controls on rare earth products and related technologies. Importers will now be required to provide detailed product usage descriptions and undergo on-site inspections by Chinese authorities. China controls between 70 and 90% of the global rare earth mining and refining market, and this move, once implemented, is expected to disrupt global supply chains for semiconductors, electric vehicles, and defense technologies. China also launched an antitrust investigation into U.S. tech giant Qualcomm, further tightening its grip on critical technology sectors. China's rare earth export restrictions faced a fierce reaction from President Trump. On October 10th, he issued a statement announcing a 100% tariff on Chinese goods, alongside strict software export limitations set to begin on November 1st. The statement also hinted at a potential export ban on Boeing aircraft and parts, along with 100% tariffs on certain Chinese-made port equipment, such as rubber-tired gantry cranes, rail-mounted cranes, and terminal tractors. The U.S. had already imposed tariffs on cranes, but the new policy would raise the total tariff rate to 270%. These actions mark the official start of the critical phase in the U.S.-China trade war. On October 14th, the new port fee policies from both sides officially took effect. On the same day, China imposed sanctions on South Korea's Hanwha Ocean for cooperating with the U.S. 301 investigation. This isn't just a trade war, it's also a diplomatic warning. Any company aligning with the U.S. will be blacklisted by Beijing. President Trump also took to Truth Social, accusing China of deliberately avoiding U.S. soybean purchases, calling it an economically hostile act. He threatened to terminate trade in oil and other sectors as retaliation. Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, in an interview with the Financial Times, sharply criticized China for using rare earth export controls to weaken the global economy, labeling it as a suicidal strategy that could slow down the global economy. He condemned China's Leninist business model, using harm to customers as leverage. Bessent pointed out that as the world's largest supplier, China would be the one to suffer most if it pulls everyone down with them. On the same day, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian defended Beijing's new measures, accusing the U.S. of issuing a series of restrictions and sanctions against China. He said, not only has the U.S. failed to reflect on its actions, but it has also threatened with high tariffs. This is not the correct way to engage with China. He urged the U.S. to correct its mistakes as soon as possible and base communication on important consensus reached during the leaders' phone call. He also warned that if the U.S. insists on its wrong path, China would take countermeasures. On October 15th, a reporter asked President Trump if the trade war would escalate if an agreement wasn't reached at the upcoming summit with President Xi Jinping. Trump responded that the trade war was already in full swing, adding that without tariffs, the U.S. would be powerless to protect its interests. Meanwhile, Scott Bessent made rare public comments criticizing China's Vice Minister of Commerce, Li Chenggang. In an interview with CNBC's Invest in America forum, Bessent accused Li of attending negotiations in late August without being invited and making threatening remarks. Bessent said Li was disrespectful and had warned that if the U.S. imposed port fees, China would ignite global chaos. According to sources familiar with the incident, Li raged uncontrollably, threatening that the U.S. would face hellfire and unpredictable retaliation if China's demands were not met. Bessent added that while he believed China didn't want to be a source of chaos, the country has a tradition of wolf warrior diplomacy, something that only China fully understands. This rare public rebuke signals growing frustration within the U.S. government. Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai addressed the press, urging China to make concessions, but emphasizing that the U.S. was ready with alternative options. Bessent added, if China wants to be an unreliable partner, the world will have to decouple. Tai reiterated that if China doesn't change course, the USTR will implement additional 100% tariffs, set to take effect on November 1st. In response to China's non-market economy, Bessent called for the U.S. to adopt industrial policies, including setting floor prices for certain industries, pre-purchasing products, and preventing China from crowding out competition. He also recommended building strategic mineral reserves and promoting self-sufficiency among the U.S. and its allies, even suggesting the government may take partial ownership in strategic industries. Bessent believes there's still room to de-escalate tensions, pointing out that the U.S. has stronger countermeasures than just rare earths. He also noted that China's actions are not only an issue for the U.S., but for the global community as a whole. Bessent reiterated that the U.S. holds significant leverage over China, stating that halting the export of products China needs would inflict equal damage on China's economy. However, Bessent stressed that the U.S. doesn't want to harm China's economy and believes China doesn't want to harm the U.S. either. China's new rare earth export restrictions are giving President Trump an opportunity to strengthen ties with long-standing allies who have been strained by the tariff war. At a recent Global Economic Leaders Conference in Washington, D.C., the issue of China's export controls took center stage. EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic openly accused China of weaponizing rare earths and called for unified action among G7 nations. He stated that China's restrictions have already forced European companies to halt production, causing significant economic losses and directly targeting civilian industries. He said, "We cannot stand by, and we need a coordinated response." The EU plans to discuss these responses at the G7 level. Japan's Minister of Finance, Katsunobu Kato, also urged the G7 to respond unitedly, while Germany's finance minister supported joint measures. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is scheduled to visit the US next week to push for a key mineral agreement, aiming to make Australia a more reliable alternative supplier than China. Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen emphasized that the EU needs to respond firmly and demonstrate the power of the world's largest trading bloc. Besant revealed that the Trump administration is consulting with the EU, Australia, Canada, India, and other Asian democracies to formulate a comprehensive response. Catherine Tai mentioned that the U.S. is committed to increasing domestic rare earth production, including investing in private companies and bringing magnet manufacturing back to the U.S. Christopher Bedore, the deputy director of China research at Graphical Dragonomics, warned that for China, the biggest risk is overplaying its hand. Disrupting the rare earth supply chain could create the impression of needlessly causing suffering. Bloomberg analysis suggests that whether through misjudgment or opportunism, this situation marks a setback for Beijing on the world stage. If countries diversify their supply chains out of concern for China's next move, the losses for China would be immense. According to analysis from FRI, recent statements from American and Chinese officials suggest that this trade war is no longer just a temporary battle. It has evolved into a high-stakes geopolitical struggle. China's chokehold tactics have alerted the West, with U.S. allies positioning themselves for action. The decoupling trend, which was originally driven by tariffs, is now extending to a complete supply chain restructuring. The absence of European and American buyers from the Canton Fair is just the tip of the iceberg. Amid rising uncertainty, companies are choosing to hedge their risks by shifting to emerging markets and avoid getting caught in the crossfire of major power struggles.